Welcome to the CGVR Study Labs thesis preparation videos. In this first video, we are going to learn about the 7 thesis types. When you see these icons for the 7 thesis types, then those icons have a blue part and a black part. So the blue part is something that you create during your thesis, and the black part is something that already exists in the world. We'll look at each of these types in more detail, but here is a brief overview. So in the research type, you discover something novel. In the survey type, you investigate and classify many existing solutions and algorithms. In the experiment type, you try out several existing solutions to one problem. In the learning materials type, you create learning materials for a course and you teach it. In the article review, you investigate an existing algorithm. In the software type, which is the most popular, you make your own software product. And in the user manual type, you write a guide for an existing solution. Those types can be categorized into types where you focus on making a new thing and where you focus on seeing existing things. They can also be put on a scale, so some of those types are more practical and some more theoretical. The first, very practical type is the author software solution. In that type, you start with a target audience. So there is a specific target audience for specific software products. Now, you will be making a new software product for that target audience. So software is always something that people will use. And you have to figure out who are the people that will use your product. And of course, there already exists some software in the world for that target audience. So you have to design your software to be somehow better or different from that existing software. You write about, first of all, what experience you wanted your target audience, your users, to have with your software. Then you can focus on how did you design your software, how did you make the system architecture or algorithms. This now depends on the actual software itself, what was the most complicated or interesting part of it. For example, for video games, it's usually game design. And of course, you also have to test, did your software work, how well did it work, did it produce the desired experience. So there are different things you can test here. You can do platform testing, you can do usability testing on a sample of your target audience, you can do performance testing and so on. This again depends on the actual software. If you're making a mobile game, then perhaps the performance testing is important because mobile phones have a limited battery life. Regardless, you usually have some usability testing to make sure that your design is actually usable for the target audience and your product is valuable. The next type is learning materials. So similarly, here you have some target audience, some students who want to learn, and you are going to teach them something. You will make learning materials that will assist in that teaching. And you write about the created materials and the teaching itself. So your thesis can answer questions: who is the target audience? And what are the learning outcomes your materials should help them achieve? Of course, when you're designing your learning materials, you should follow some didactic principles. So you have to write about what were the didactic principles you were following when you were creating the materials. And you have to use your materials in actually teaching and measuring their effectiveness in how well did the students now achieve the learning outcomes with your materials. A very similar type is the user manual or guide. So here there exists some existing technology. It can be a new API, it can be some software product, it could even be a challenge that other people face. Now you write a user manual or a guide to use that technology or to overcome that challenge. You write about what were the users of that technology expecting and how did you design your guide to help them achieve those expectations. Of course, here as well you have to measure, did the users actually benefit from your guide. The last type where you focus on making something is independent research. Here there exist some algorithms, some scientific papers already in the world published. They could be different algorithms for solving a specific challenge. Now you take those as input and based on those make your own algorithm, advancing the knowledge and solutions from the previous papers. Of course, you write about how does your algorithm relate to the existing published papers, published algorithms. Then how does your algorithm work? From your thesis, everyone should be able to replicate your solution, your algorithm. So you have to describe your algorithm in quite a general way in your work. You can use pseudocode or flowcharts or whatever is best for describing your solution. You also have to quantify how well did your algorithm work. So usually in those publications, people have performance measurements, or they could also be visual comparisons. So if your algorithm is now producing a procedurally generated world that is supposed to be lifelike, you can take real-life photographs from the specific landscape you're generating and visually compare them to the result of your algorithm. This type can also include a demo app, but differently from the author software solution, this is not a product that someone can already use and find beneficial for solving a particular problem. It is just a demo app that is showcasing your algorithm. The software quality of that demo app also doesn't have to be as good as in the software solution type. Now the types where you see existing things. So article review. There exists one paper or one algorithm that you're going to focus on, that you're going to review. Now you take that algorithm, that paper apart, and you find the pros and cons of that proposed solution. You can also try to improve on the cons. So maybe there were some situations where the original algorithm did not work, so you have identified those situations and improved on the algorithm such that these solutions, at least some of them, are now better covered. In your thesis, you write, did you get the same result as in the original paper? So the original paper proposed an algorithm and they achieved some solutions, so you have replicated that algorithm and you're seeing if you're getting the same solutions. Then you write about what problems you identified and potentially how you solved them. And of course, there is always room for improvement. So you should also identify what were the issues that you left open. The next type where you see existing things is the survey type. So here you have many things, more than 10. And those things can be different software or hardware or algorithms. They can even be people, but there are many of those. So at least more than 10, usually something like 50 or maybe even 100. Your thesis focuses on analyzing those objects and categorizing them. So you're going to provide some kind of a new perspective or new categorization or a landscape of those objects. Your thesis should explain how did you survey those solutions, how did you pick them, what methodology you used to measure some properties of those, and even maybe what objects were left out. Of course, you should provide that new categorization or new system of those objects, or some informative result on the landscape of the objects you analyzed. You should also see if your results or conclusions are generalizable and maybe be somewhat careful about making very bold generalizable claims if you don't have the data to back it up. And the last type is experiments. So in this type you have several, not one, not many, but about 2 to 10 some existing technologies or objects. It can also be hardware, and it can also be elements of a technology stack. So the experiments could be conducted on individual objects, or maybe you have a technology stack with 3 layers, where at each layer there are 3 options of different technologies that you could use there. So you have different combinations that you want to test out. Of course, in the experiments type, you experimentally test those objects, and depending on the objects, maybe possible ways on how to combine them. You write about your experiments, how you set them up, how you chose the objects for the experiments, how you conducted the experiments, what data did you gather and how. Then you have to analyze your data. So you analyze the gathered data, and that will produce you some differentiation between the objects. And in the end, you will try to answer what are the best technologies given some criteria. For example, if you're testing out virtual reality headsets, the one property that you measure could be the price of the headsets, and maybe you're then doing some experiments with people, so which headset they prefer, and you might come to a conclusion that for first-time virtual reality users, the cheapest headset produces pretty much the same enjoyment as the most expensive headset. So your conclusion is that buy cheap headsets for first-time virtual reality users. Now you can also combine different types, and you will likely use elements from different types regardless of your main type. For example, if you're doing an author software solution type, you will probably start with a small survey of existing solutions. And maybe your new product to be valuable needs you to create a new algorithm. So you focus on existing algorithms and you try to create a new algorithm to make your product stand out in the market. But regardless of those things, you are still making a software solution for a target audience. So there is still one main type, one focus, and you should complete all the steps of that one main type. One mistake that students sometimes make is they try to pick the simplest aspects from different types and then put those together as a thesis. So this is not very good, because then you're taking the simplest things and the overall result will be somewhat poor. So you still have this one main type. If it's a software solution, you have to analyze your target audience, you have to analyze the market, similar existing products, then how does your product stand out among them, and what new experience does it provide for the users, or how is it beneficial. You design your solution. In game design, for example, you make some new game design that doesn't exist in the market, but people crave for, and now you try to analyze, you test your solution on actual users, see if your new design is something that people find enjoyment in or valuable. So do not skip the steps of, let's say, a software solution type to replace them with some other steps from other types. Regardless of the type, you should be able to fulfill completely that type. You do that well, and maybe you do have some parts of other types that you add on top of it, or you're using within your particular type. So the takeaway here is that, first of all, know what type of a thesis you're doing. Different types have you do very different things, so you should know what is the type of your thesis and what you are going to do to complete that type. This leads to you focusing on all the aspects of that one type, and, well, basically you have to do one thing and do it well.